Hi, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you for having me.
Great,
Again.
Right. Let's get straight in with the first question. As a doctor, how did you end up focusing on kids?
I did a year as a junior doctor, and after that year I took 6 months out and I thought, right, in that time I'm just going to do a couple of other things. Literally after a month I just went for a pediatric job, and I happened to just get it. I was more shocked than anyone when I got it, and it just pulled me back in.
So when is it the right time to take your child to the doctor?
It's really hard to answer that question because it is very much dependent on the situation, and you can't go through every single medical scenario and say, right, if it's this, do this, if it's this, do this, this is when to worry in this circumstance. There are certain things that we tell everybody to just look out for because these are signs of serious illnesses, and again, this includes things like if you're excessively drowsy, if you're not passing much urine and therefore might be dehydrated, if you've got a rash that doesn't fade when you press it, if you're having fits or convulsions, obviously, if you've got serious breathing problems, or if you've got a child that's got a temperature for a very long time, so over 5 days, or if you've got a baby, so under 3 months, that's got a high temperature. A lot of medical conditions can change over time, and some of the signs that you might be looking out for may not be there at the start. There's actually a risk you can go and seek help too soon, and then we can't diagnose what's going on because the signs and symptoms aren't there. Whereas at the same time, you shouldn't leave it too long either. What I would say overall, first and foremost, trust your instinct. If you're worried and you think, hang on, I'm not quite sure about this, it's always better to speak to somebody or go and see someone and be reassured than to sit at home and worry. And likewise, if you've gone somewhere, sought help and you've been reassured and you go back home and some time has passed and you're still concerned, go back and get a review.
Okay, so how do we get our kids to take medicine?
Oh gosh, every parent's nightmare, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You can, and I would usually discuss this with your pharmacist, but you can disguise it in things. So jam, yogurts and other food, you can often disguise it in something like that, and I've definitely done that. What you've got to think is, if you're worried about giving, and quite rightly I think people do worry about giving their children sugar.
Yeah.
Your course of antibiotics is going to be a week, let's say, for example. Yeah. If you have to give them a bit of sugar for a week to get them to take antibiotics that is going to treat an infection, you are better off doing that and giving them a bit of sugar than struggling to get these antibiotics in, partially treating an infection and actually making them more stressed so that next time it happens, they'll remember and they'll do it all over again.
So it's obviously easy to think of a million physical issues with kids to talk about, but we'd also like to ask you a bit about the mental health issues, because kids are suffering more and more with mental health issues. Really young kids as well, which is really worrying. Yeah. What do we do about that? If you think that your child's behaviour is changing or something's not right, what can we do about that? Where can we go for help?
It could just be that your child is on a certain side of the spectrum of normality. That's what it is. And they just need...
having a tough time at school.
Or having a tough time at school, or having a tough time at home for another reason.
Yeah.
And actually all they need is certain extra, bits of guidance or mechanisms put in place to help them. ADHD is a classic example of that. Hyperactive behaviour is actually one part of the spectrum of normality. It's actually quite normal for certain age kids to be a bit like that. We've just said that right up beyond this point we're going to class it as a disorder. Yeah. There are some children who have very severe problems and real issues and really, really need help. And there are other children that have traits of it that actually don't need medicating. What they need is guidance and boundaries and things like that, and what we call certain parenting practices put in place that will help them.
What about something like counselling, or if a child perhaps needs to just talk through stuff and perhaps can't talk about it at home for whatever reason, do we go to our doctors about that as well?
It's really hard to know, so you go to whoever you feel is comfortable. Remember, you've always got school to talk to as well, and there's a resource of a whole wealth of information there. They can either provide services for you sometimes, so a lot of schools are linked in with educational psychologists and things like that, Or they can say, right, actually, we would recommend that you see this person or talk to this person. There are organisations online that really help as well. So there's loads of charities. There's one particular one that runs a helpline called Young Minds.
Yeah.
And they run a helpline for parents. So they've got lots of information on mental health conditions and issues and problems in general, but there is a specific helpline that you can just pick up the phone if you want a bit of advice.
How important is mum health and looking after ourselves?
Yeah.
Physically and emotionally, mentally?
It's possibly the most important thing as a parent that you need to look at. Parenting is really hard work sometimes. Really hard work. You give and you give and you give, and you're exhausted by the end of the day. Your, emotional reserves are at rock bottom. You don't have time to look after yourself or your partner. I would always say, keep a little bit back for yourself. Be mindful of how you're feeling as well. Be mindful of your physical health. Don't neglect yourself. And if you are running into trouble, speak to somebody. Just speak to them. That might be a friend, it might be a member of your family, it might be a partner, or it might be a professional.
And again, where do we go if we're feeling wobbly as as parents?
Well, a lot of people feel that if they need help themselves, they've failed. And actually you haven't. Seeking help and stepping up and admitting that you need help is probably the biggest step that you can take, and it's the hardest step that you can take. It takes an immense amount of strength and courage. So seek out help with those around you, seek out support with those around you. There might be friends, it might be fellow mums, it might be family, and then there's always that professional backup there for you as well.
But talk to someone.